Hello and welcome back to a Squirrel Plays. Today we will be rambling about writers versus GMs. And if you thought I was going to do the epic rap battles of history intro, trust me, I wanted to, but the editing skills just aren't there yet. I watched a video a good while back when first getting into D&D, and I believe it was Professor Dungeon Master that said it. If it was someone else, I apologize profusely. But the words that were said were, writers aren't GMs and GMs aren't writers. And just to be clear, by writer, I mean somebody who writes stories, a novelist, if you will, or heck, even a short story writer. The writer is writing a story, not playing a game. And by GM, I of course mean a game master, somebody who is playing any ttrpg, not just D&D. And if your first thought is, well, wait just a minute, my short but incredibly handsome and fuzzy friend, they're not that different. They're both telling a story, right? Well, yes and no. I'd also like to clarify that I'm not being a gatekeeper here and that you can do whichever you want or both. There's just some differences I think it's good to be aware of, and knowing those differences will help you do a better job. And what are those differences? First, we need to figure out where the writer and the GM hit a fork in the road. Let's make a list here. I'll put writers on the left and GMs on the right because the GM is always right and you shouldn't argue with him. So what do these guys do? We know a writer has to make a world, right? Got to have a place for events to take place in. What about a GM? Well, yeah, they got to have a world too. Could be their own homebrew world, or maybe they're borrowing a pre-made one. But hey, writers could be borrowing one too, so we'll say both of them create worlds. What about characters? A writer definitely makes those. He's got to fill the world up with something, so might as well put some people in it. Or aliens, or robots, or talking animals. It really doesn't matter. Whatever makes you happy. The characters are what's going to make that story, as mentioned in my previous video. And the GM? Well, we've already hit the fork in the road, but it was small, and so far we're still driving side by side one another. A GM does make characters. He or she can make lots of characters, as a matter of fact. Townspeople, guards, monsters, even the BBEG of the story. But he doesn't make all the characters of the story. The GM makes everything but the heroes of the story, and those non-hero characters in this case are called NPCs. So already we've found a slight difference. The writer has to make all the characters, whereas the GM has to make everything except the heroes of the story. A small difference on paper, but a fairly large difference in practice. Then the next step is when we really start to see the gap in our two roads and we start to drift away from one another. The writer gives their characters and or the world problems to overcome. The GM gives their characters and or world a problem. Notice the difference there? The writer has to find the solution. He has to keep going. The writer writes the story from start to finish and everything in between. The GM starts a story and then has to release it. The players are the ones that have to overcome the problems the GM has created. They'll decide how it's done, or in some cases, not done. And that's where the journey of these two creatives goes their separate ways. Yes, on the front end, there is a lot they have in common, but eventually they go in very different directions. Now, what happens when one crosses into the other? For example, an individual who has written a few stories in his life decides to give GMing a go. Or maybe the forever GM of 10 years decides to finally write that novel. What issues might they run into? I'll start with the writer deciding to be a GM, as that one hits a little closer to home for me. Some of you know this and some of you don't, but I'm on the writing side of the fence. I've been writing for a long time, and as of recording this, I currently have one book being edited and am working on my next one. Writing is what I love to do, and with any luck, I'll be doing it full-time one day. I think the hardest thing for a writer to do when they start GMing is to let their story go. You have to admit that not only is the story most likely not going to go the way you want it to go, you really shouldn't have a desired path for it to begin with. Remember, the GM starts the story, the player are the ones that carry it out. As a writer, that's really hard to do sometimes. And how do you do it? I honestly couldn't tell you. The best advice I can give you is to just chill out and enjoy the ride. If you want to write, then go write. Don't force your writing onto people wanting to play a game. The benefit of this approach is it's going to be far less work on your part as the GM. Instead of crafting an entire world complete with religions, deities, military, cities, regions, and who knows what else that the players will probably never encounter, just make the city they start in. If they decide to venture out of the city, make what you need for where they're going. On more than one occasion, I've seen a playerless GM proudly state that he's been working on a campaign for years and how many hundreds of pages into it he is. If that's you, I want you to take a deep breath and pause for a moment, because you've gone way too far, and whenever you do find some players, you're going to be extremely upset because nothing is going to go the way you planned or hoped for. Nobody is going to ask about the history of the kingdom. They're not going to ask where the magic came from. They're not going to inquire about the shopkeeper's family troubles. They're not going to do anything but cause trouble and head for the loot. And that's because it's a game and that's a fun thing to do, and we play games to have fun. Does that mean all your work is wasted? Well, of course not. A good writer never scraps anything. Keep your ideas written down somewhere because you'll never know when they'll be useful. I mean, who knows? Maybe you'll find a way to use them in that book you've been working on, or maybe you'll use some of it in a different campaign. But what about the other way? What about a GM that's told he's good at making stories and he decides to give it a go at writing a book? Well, the first thing you might want to do is check yourself into some therapy because you have to be a little nuts to want to write a book. If all that comes back positive, my first piece of advice would be to take absolutely zero influence from any TTRPG session you've had. Worlds for TTRPGs, and video games for that matter, are built different. They tend to be built around the players in order to make things convenient and enjoyable. The most offensive example of this would be Skyrim. The entire world is based off your stats. As you get stronger, other enemies get stronger too, but nobody gets too far ahead of you. Also, nobody's life in that game will progress without your permission. Even the most urgent quests will wait for you to do whatever you need or want to do first. Why? Because if it didn't, the game would be a lot less fun. If everything around you was getting stronger without your involvement, you'd be left behind rather quickly unless you took all the right steps to stay ahead. If quests progressed without you, you'd probably miss most of them. In short, it wouldn't be a great experience, and TTRPGs are no different. In the writing world, though, it doesn't work that way. If you write in such a way that the world bends to the whims of your main character, then congratulations, you qualify for a job at Disney. If you're writing a good story, things probably won't often work out in your character's favor. If anything, it might feel like the universe is against them. People don't automatically accept them for what they are and whatever they say. They aren't good at everything they do, and they don't win every battle they get into. Sometimes, and these are my favorite types of stories, the main character will even die at the end of the story because that's how life often goes. This is the unfortunate life of a character in a written story. It's much different and far less glamorous than that of a game character. Again, of course, unless you're writing for Disney, or hell, even Amazon at this point, we've fallen so far. And if all of this makes it sound like I'm saying game characters are lesser, I assure you they are not. They are perfectly capable of telling a very compelling story and can break your heart just as well as any other character. Some can even do it without speaking a single word. Another thing I've seen many a GM and or game player do when dipping their feet into the waters of the writing world is oversimplify a people. And in their defense, even big studios are guilty of doing this. It's easy to take an entire race and say all of them do this one thing. All of them believe this certain way, and they all fight for one common goal. It's even easier to do that when you're used to working in games. Games work that way because it's easier for the player to digest and move on. When you're in a game world, you can be told that the Scritonians are a lovely people who worship the almighty acorn. They all get along for the most part and stay out of the rest of the universe's way, except for this one guy that's decided to try and take over the world. The player can easily take that information and run with it. He knows the Scritonians are all right, but one of them has gone rogue. It doesn't need to be explored any farther than that because that would just bog down the player. But let's have a look at the real world for just a second. Instead of worshiping the almighty acorn, let's have a look at Christianity. At a high level, you have Protestants and Catholics. So right away, we've split the religion into two parts. If you go down the Protestant path, you'll find several more variations of that religion. You'll find Baptists, Presbyterians, Anglicans, Methodists, and the list goes on and on and on. And when you pick one of those, let's say Baptists, you'll find there's multiple variations of Baptists because they all continue to have disagreements and go their separate ways. Say you go down another level and choose Southern Baptist. You'll find that no two Southern Baptist churches seem to be the same, and not only that, you'll find plenty of strife and disagreement within a single Southern Baptist church. People, while incredibly simple, are actually somehow at the same time quite complex. To lump an entire race or species into one thing is a rookie mistake when it comes to writing. It makes sense for some games, not all, but when writing a story, it's something you have to watch out for. And I've saved the worst offender for last, the mechanics. All stories have their own rules and mechanics that they make and need to adhere to, unless you're working for Disney, in which case that requires entirely too much effort. GMs love their mechanics. They know the rules back and forth and inside out. They've mastered them, and with them they've created some pretty crazy things. The GM can spend years fleshing out the rules for a magic system, and I don't mean the structured number rules for a game, I mean the rules in their story. The problem is the GM is often so obsessed with their work that they tend to go overboard when explaining things in their story. They want to make sure that you know all the work they put into the system and that it does actually work. I've been there, I've over-explained things plenty of times. That's why we have editors. Yes, you do need to know how things work, but you don't have to give all those details to the reader. You just need to give them enough to go on. Also, I'm sure we've all heard it before, but you need to show, not tell. A good, or I guess in this case, a bad example of this would be a book I read not that long ago. I hate to say this about the guy as he's a new author, but unless you're looking for a solid example of what not to do, I do not recommend this book at all. The plot was somewhat interesting, but its presentation was lacking. Despite it being a relatively short book, every other page managed to feel like a Wikipedia entry. The author wanted you to know every little detail he had fleshed out in his world-building notes. A lot of it wasn't even needed, but even what was needed could have been shown instead of outright explained. By explaining everything, not only did he make the story hard to read, he ruined several scenes that would have been surprising and well done because you as a reader already knew what was happening thanks to the info dump. Ironically, this book also had a seriously bad case of video game logic by making all the races behave as one entity. For example, all the elves were tall and slender and fought with 2 swords. Every single one of them. They all got the dexterity racial bonus. Honestly, I could make a whole video talking about this thing, but I won't. That'd probably be a bit rude despite it being a terrific learning opportunity, but I digress. It's good to know the mechanics of your creation, but that doesn't mean you need to explain every single detail in your story. And honestly, I think I'm going to stop there. I've already rambled a bit and I could go on for a lot longer, but I'd like to keep it short enough where people can digest some of it and discuss it in the comments. Because that's what we're here for, right? I just need to learn to ramble less. But as always, it is shout-out time, and today's shout-out is Old Grognard Says. I like this guy. He's dropped some wisdom in the comments of previous videos, and especially in the most recent community post I made about a problem player. But also, Old Grognard Says has a cool little project he's working on. He's actually just started his own YouTube channel. I've watched a couple so far, and I really like what he's doing. He's taking some random rules from older games and just talking about how they work. Man's got a nice voice and doesn't give you a ton of fluff. This is when I wish I had millions of followers so I could tell them all to go check him out and give him a huge boost, but I'll gladly take what I can. I encourage all of you watching this to mosey over there and have a listen. And that's it. It was a bit of a ramble, but I think it's an interesting train of thought. Make sure you comment down below and share what you think. Do you think you lean on the writer's side, or do you lean more towards the GM side? Or maybe you think they are the same thing and I'm full of crock. I'm not here to change your mind, so you're more than welcome to have your own opinion so long as you share it.